In the summer of 2022, I decided to ride my bike across the country. I've been wanting to do a long distance human powered trip for quite some time, and if I didn't do it now, when would I? I may never get the chance. So on July 5th, Christian and I got on our bicycles and started an adventure, something we'll never forget. Climbing out of this gully was probably the hardest challenge of the whole trip. It was wet, muddy, and unrideable. Every time you stopped climbing, the mosquitoes swarmed all over you. We were soaked in sweat once we made it to the top, and we weren't even 15 miles into the trip yet. The hill out of Brookville was a big challenge of day 2, but we were smiling at the top. This was a long climb up, but you gotta earn the downhills. After a very fast descent, we pulled off to the side to play in the river for a bit and cool off. We detoured to State College, Pennsylvania to visit a bicycle shop. I'm glad we did. I love this little town. Leaving State College, the road mercifully followed the valley, so it was relatively easy riding through Amish country. This was a short day and most of it downhill. If only they could all be like this. Just by chance, we rode past an excellent little bike store in Danville, and the owner recommended an alternate route to Berwick that included a brewery with the best pizza I had the entire trip. We started the day climbing a mountain, and somehow it was still all uphill on the other side. After passing through the state park, we discovered our intended stop for the night no longer existed, so we decided over a pizza to continue on for another 15 miles to a different campground. Remember to ride slow and take pictures of the cool bugs.
Riding through the Delaware Water Gap National Recreation Area, the roads were absolutely littered with potholes that you couldn't see until you were right on them. It's a wonder our rims even survived the day. And then, around the top of the first big peak of the day, it started our first heavy rain, but we were already soaked from sweat, so it didn't really matter. Riding down this long downhill, I kept looking over my left shoulder thinking, man, that's a pretty view. And then at the bottom I see the sign, Majestic View Farms. Pretty fitting. This was a very fast gravel descent into town, and then a very nice rail trail out to Taconic State Park. But sadly, right before we arrived, Christian had the first flight of the tour.
We were stopped in the shade on the side of the hill when another bike tourist came on by. He was running the Chicago to Boston route doing 100-mile days. We took off up the hill at the same time, and he was out of sight in less than a minute. It was a very enjoyable bike trail in Willimantic. It was kind of unexpected how nice the bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure was in this town in the middle of nowhere, but it's always a nice surprise. We made it to North Kingstown, Rhode Island, essentially completing the first leg of the trip. The next day we took a train to Boston to sightsee, and the following day we were back on the road riding along the coast south. Christian was not pleased about this little off-road segment, but his reply to "smile for the camera" made me chuckle and smile more. We had seen the Atlantic a few days before, but this was the first day we actually stepped in it. when we showed up at Rocky Neck State Park, a little kid on a bicycle rode up beside me and I said, "You want to race?" And he took off and I caught up and passed him and he yelled out, "How? You have so much stuff on your bike." Turns out mountains are pretty good race prep. One of the wires near the supporting strut on Christian's front basket snapped, so we stopped at this muffler shop and they fixed him up as best they could. Visiting the Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Vault at Yale was definitely one of the highlights of the trip for me. It had some very cool stuff on display. I had been looking forward to crossing New York City and playing in traffic for a very long time. But it turns out that their bike infrastructure is so outstanding you never have to ride in traffic at all. It was super well thought out. It was easily the best infrastructure of the entire trip. Pretty much the instant we crossed the river into Pennsylvania again, the steep hills started. All I have to say about Chester, Pennsylvania is that you should find any alternative route around it rather than riding through it. And after riding through the industrial park right after and getting covered in grime, I was pretty much done with the day and suggested taking the train the last 10 miles to our stop. So we did, and it was totally worth it. The bridge coming into Havre de Grace was a white knuckle adrenaline packed thrill ride. There's 2 lanes in each direction, but everybody wanted to ride in the lane with the bicycles. The one redeeming factor of Baltimore was the official signage telling you to reduce your speed stated, "Slow your roll."
DC was great to visit. It had good museums and the fastest accelerating metro I've ever been on. It had good bike lanes, it was very walkable, but this is where Christian and I parted ways. He caught a train back, and I'd be riding solo from here on out. I disgusted a waitress in Fredericksburg. I ordered this massive Godzilla burger, and when the waitress came back to ask if everything was alright, she goes, "Oh my god, you're already finished?" She looked absolutely appalled. Riding into Richmond is great. It looks exactly like you think an old southern city will look like, but the real treat of the day was finding out that there's a bike trail the entire 53 miles to Jamestown. Compared to the rest of Virginia, this was excellent. These little helmet mirrors are tantamount to a superpower. Previously to this trip, I never used them because they look kind of dorky, but I'll never ride on the road without one again. They're amazing. From here until the end of the trip, it rained every single day, at least once. Sometimes heavy, sometimes just a short little sprinkle in the sunshine, but there was never a day when the water didn't fall from the sky. The Outer Banks in general were another highlight of the trip. I think they do everything the Florida Keys do, but better, cheaper, and with less people. They have absolutely beautiful white sand beaches, all to yourself, not another soul on them. It's amazing. Highly recommended. I took what I thought was a shortcut to my campsite, but it just led me into an off-road park. I seriously confused the locals in their Jeeps on my bike loaded down with gear. I had to backtrack and take the main road.
sandbars shift regularly so the ferry ride times change, but the ferry captains do some impressive maneuvering to them. The ferry holds about 12 cars and takes about 45 minutes to drop you off on Ocracoke's north end, so you have 12 cars or so passing you every hour and a half. It's essentially deserted and you have the road to yourself. Very good riding. The ferry back to the mainland took just under 3 hours. It was the first time I've been out of sight of land in all directions. Pretty neat. I made it this far without a single flat, but of course it had to be pouring down rain when the first one happened. I walked the bike until I saw a fire department and I changed the tube under their awning, and then they let me use their air compressor too, so nice folks.
Virginia Beach and Myrtle Beach feel very similar to me. The main difference was that Virginia Beach has nightclubs and Myrtle Beach has breakfast buffets. They cater to very different audiences. This was an absolutely miserable 5 miles. The sand road seemed rideable at first, but then the rain came and turned it into a mud that you sank down into your spokes. It didn't rain long, but now I was walking and shoving the bike through mud dripping with sweat, and then the mosquitoes found me and didn't let up until I made it back to a paved road where I could outride them. This bridge in Charleston is awesome. It's the third longest cable-stayed bridge in the Western Hemisphere. I did a real short ride today as I was toying with the idea of attempting my first ever 100-mile ride. I wanted to do at least one 100-mile ride before the end of the trip. Today was the day I decided I was going to leave South Carolina and attempt 100 miles to Savannah, Georgia. The road from Switzerland to Hardeeville was awful. There were these cuts in the road and each side of the cut was uneven. It was like riding over a sharp 2-inch curb every 30 feet. My rear tube popped 4 different times during this section, but the slime held it together. I considered changing the tube, but I didn't, as it seemed fine after leaving this bit of road behind.
I didn't want to use my last new spare tube without getting another, but my rear tube had it. I pulled over into a gas station and swapped it out and rotated the tires like I had been meaning to do for the last 800 miles. Pretty much the entirety of the east coast of Florida and all of the A1A had a bike lane. It was very nice riding in the few and far between spots where you do have to share a lane. The cars are used to seeing bicycles and very considerate. The storm was strong enough that it snapped my tent poles around 1 a.m. I zip tied them together temporarily and went back to bed though. This is the only storm I took cover from the entire trip. I normally just ride in the rain, but I couldn't see 5 feet in front of me, and then the lightning started striking like Florida had wronged it.
a guy on a road bike caught up to me and asked if I had lunch yet. I hadn't, and he wanted to ask a whole bunch of questions about my trip so far. And plus, I never turned down free food. There's a bus expressway built right next to the highway and a half-finished bike trail beside that. I ended up riding on the bus lane more often than not. This was my most expensive night camping for the whole trip, in what was essentially a large gravel parking lot, but it was still cheaper than a hotel. It stormed all night, and the next morning all the folks in RVs came by to say, "We thought about offering you our couch when the storm got bad." Wasn't even the worst storm I camped through. Didn't even break my tent poles. I flew across 7 Mile Bridge. I had a tailwind the whole way, which was good because there was a storm forming behind me and I was going to try and outrun it. It did rain a little as I entered Key West, but it didn't dampen my spirits any. 2,960 miles of recorded riding, plus little trips here and there to stock up on food and supplies. Once I reached the southernmost point, I immediately started thinking where I was going to ride next.